Good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome to the first program on candidate experience. Our apologies that we got a little bit delayed. We had a bit of technical issues as technology brings to the table, but I'm very happy that we were able to manage to start. It's my pleasure to welcome you all. This is, as you know, the first program as part of the certification program that we're running on employee experience that got launched last Friday. I'm very excited to welcome you again. It was a pleasure to meet you all on the pre-conference on Thursday, and then we had a fantastic day on Friday that ended with the music performance. So really a truly wonderful experience. And now we're going to deep dive, as you know, into the five different programs that we've curated. So today we're starting with the recruitment, and then after we complete these, we'll move into learning and digital skills. Then we'll move into careers and rewards, and then we'll move into automation in HR operations. So it's a pleasure to welcome you all. And today we're going to have the privilege to welcome one of our practitioners turned now into, in a way, faculty. So we have the privilege to welcome Rachel Fitton, who is the senior faculty member at the George Burstein Academy. So very warm morning, Rachel, and a warm welcome to the program.
Thank you.
So I had the privilege to meet Rachel when she was leading talent acquisition for Hewlett Packard. And after that, she joined the Intel organization. She's based in Singapore. And I think she is somebody who has seen the talent acquisition as a function evolving and now decided to share some of those insights and actually be part of the capability journey of talent acquisition leaders. So I'm very excited, Rachel, that you've taken your time to be with us, not only to share some of your insights and experiences, but also to bring some of the new skills and new approaches to really navigate through the problems that we have today in talent acquisition, but also to reimagine what the future may look like.
Thank you.
So the structure that we're going to be having today, we've requested Rachel to take us through the masterclass that she's going to be sharing. After that, we're going to go to our tables for a brief, probably 10 minutes interaction. There we've chosen one topic. I think many of you have asked to each other, what are the new things that you're trying, what is working, what's not working. So we'll give you a little bit of a breakout time to share what is the one thing that you've experimented that it's working for your organization. So that we will do immediately after Rachel's session. After that, we're going to have a case study. We're going to have the opportunity to have Poonam Yadav, who's the head of talent staffing for Aditya Birla Group. She's going to share also how Aditya Birla Group is navigating the current challenges and what are the things that they're doing specifically on leadership hiring. And after that, we'll go back to the breakout room for one more opportunity to share what is the one tool or one digital technology that has been really useful to you as you go through this pandemic and this situation. So what are the things that you have experimented? So that's going to be the second breakout room that we will do after Poonam's session. So we have an hour and 45 minutes and a lot to cover. So before we start, Rachel, with your session, I always like to start by asking people how you're feeling at this moment. So if you want to share, Akansha, what's the Menti quote? We can do that in a very brief minute. So I'll invite you to go to another tab on your browser and go to menti.com, and the code is 900284. 900284. Go to menti.com. You can go, Rachel, as well if you want to participate. So very quickly, how are you feeling today? So feeling red means that I'm extremely overwhelmed. I am feeling a bit restless, a bit helpless. And it's not how you felt yesterday or how you will wish to feel. It's how you're feeling at this moment. Yellow means I am feeling a bit stressed, but I'm kind of managing. It's okay. I will navigate through this. And green means I'm feeling absolutely wonderful. So very quickly, just to get a check-in on how we're feeling this morning. For some of you who are joining us from India, it's 9:15. For some of you who are joining us from Southeast Asia, it's already 11:30. So I think for the Southeast Asian community, you may feel more green than the India community. Let's see. Oh, in Nigeria it's 4 a.m. Okay, so we do have people who have woken up so early, Rachel, to join your session. All right, let's have a quick look, Akansha, on the results. How are we feeling today? All right, I have no clue why we have two different colors, but it's great to see many of us are feeling green. So 50% green, almost 50% yellows. So yellow is a very common place to be during this pandemic because yellow is the place of uncertainty. Yellow is the place of confusion. So it's common to be in yellow, and we always see that when we ask that. For a very courageous 4% who are saying I'm feeling red, and now it's actually reducing. I think for many of you who said that I feel red, probably you've moved to yellow just by sharing that you're feeling red today. So Rachel, we have a big green in this group, and I can see the yellow going down. And hopefully by end of this session today, we may have migrated some of the greens to green and some of the reds to yellow.
What is that? Let me see.
Wonderful. So let's get started. I'm going to put myself on mute. If I can request Poonam as well to put yourself on mute if possible. And over to you, Rachel. You may want to give a little bit of an overview, and we'll be sharing your presentation from Akansha's screen. So over to you, please.
Wonderful. Well, I mean, it's really such a pleasure as ever to be speaking with People Matters, and what interesting times we have as well. Wonderful. So I was actually one of the people who just went red because the reason why we were technically delayed is because I couldn't find the right sound on my laptop. So it happens to us all, whether you've got 10 years of experience or 20 years of experience, the technology doesn't always work with you. And it's funny, I picked this slide as the first one. And this, I don't know if we all remember, was from 2017. This was a guy called Professor Rob Keeley, and he was doing an interview with the BBC. And during the interview, suddenly his children burst into the room, and then his wife scooted into the room to collect the children, and all he could do was giggle. And funny, when you look at that video, now 39 million people have watched it. But right now, who hasn't had their children interrupt a presentation, or who hasn't had the dog or the cat suddenly start barking when they're interviewing a candidate, or the mailman show up? We've all had it now. And I guess that's a testimony to what is our new, right? It's things have changed. Whereas we may have all been in person in our offices 6 months ago, whoever could have predicted this year and the seismic changes that have happened, and that we would learn words like lockdown, COVID-19, all of these different things. But the amazing thing is that we've been able to keep our plane flying. So I do hope that we do have a lot of green here, because I think we've done a wonderful job collectively of keeping our organizations going, of being able to still recruit people, of being able to still onboard people, and still do our jobs and still enjoy doing our jobs. So I hope that you all give yourselves every night a good clap and say, well done. If we can move on to the next slide, please. Okay, in today's agenda, so I will do a little bit of an introduction about myself. I know that Esther has kindly said some very nice words about me, but I'll introduce myself a little bit further. And then let's talk about what is candidate experience, especially for remote hiring. I think for many of you, remote hiring is not absolutely new, but remote hiring as it is right now is very new. At the end of the day, you could have candidates that you have made offers to in other locations that can't travel to their new place of work. They may not be able to enter the borders of the country where they're planning to work. And we've never had a situation like this. And I think it really starts to put into focus what is that candidate experience with new problems and new agility that we need to find. Next, let's talk about how do we invent our digital recruiting experience. And I think I take this in two different ways. One is looking at it from how would you just actually do it? And the second in terms of thinking about it in terms of remote hiring. And that will also feed into talking about tech and thinking about what tech can help you. And I think it's a very interesting breakout session that you'll have in terms of talking about digital recruiting and then thinking about, what can tech do to you? And the next, and I think it's a very fascinating topic right now, is e-onboarding. E-onboarding is not something new. If you start to Google up e-onboarding, you'll see the phrase from 2016, 2015. But really, of course, we have to be very conscious now about what is e-onboarding and what is cultural fit and what would retention look like in 12 months' time. It may be that the people that we hire right now that are really good at working at home by themselves may not necessarily be the people that want to come into the office in 12 months' time. And they may not necessarily always fit in with what is your return to work program. So I think this creates us an interesting sort of thought process about how are we recruiting right now and how will we transition if we are transitioning. And then towards the end, then we will have wrap up and questions as well. And you're free to put questions in the toolbar. I can't see any questions or anything else, but I'm looking forward to see having a good set of questions afterwards. So let's just move along to the next slide. So a little bit about me. I think if I was a tree, and I think we all know about how you look at trees and you age trees, you look at the rings inside. So if I'm going to date myself, I am pre-Zoom and I'm pre-Skype and I'm actually pre-LinkedIn. So I've worked in recruiting and talent acquisition for a long time. And what I've liked and what Esther highlighted is what I've found interesting is how we've changed. So when I started recruiting, I was told that email may take off for recruiting. Of course, could you imagine now somebody telling you that? You'd think they were completely and utterly insane. And what I've found interesting is how TA has been one of the foremost areas, I think, in HR and technology, and how we have looked to try and be more adaptable and to find different solutions. Yet at the same time, we still have the same similar problems. We still is trying to work out sometimes, is this the right candidate? And I don't believe that we have actually always cracked the things that we think we have. I've also had roles where I've been responsible for reasonably high volumes of hiring. I know in India that you can have roles where you've got tens of thousands of hires, so probably I seem kind of small. But I run teams where we've done over 5,000 hires a year. And a number of those hires have been obviously very remote to me. I've had most of my teams in India and in China. And so not only have I hired remotely, I've managed teams remotely. And to me, I think this is also an interesting problem right now, and something that we help people with is thinking about how do you create that one team when you're in a geographically dispersed team? How do you take the silos down? How do you take that country or that line specificity down and bring everybody together and create that virtual warm and fuzzy feeling that you want to have? The other thing that's very interesting about me is I've actually been a remote employee, and not a lot of people realize that. So when I joined Deloitte in 2012, I actually joined a part of Deloitte called DTTL, and DTTL is the holdco for Deloitte. So if you kind of think about it, it's where the member firms would pay in for their websites, to pay in for their branding, and from that they get some resources as well, and I was one of their resources. So when I joined Deloitte, I thought I was joining Deloitte, the member firm in Singapore, but as it happened, I joined Deloitte as in DTTL. And as part of DTTL in Singapore, although Deloitte had nearly 1,500 employees, I was one of two people from DTTL. And so I experienced myself what it's like to be a remote employee, in the sense that other people have teams, other people get to go to lunches, other people have celebrations. And myself and my desk were my only colleague for a long time. And I also had to work out within that, what is my boundaries for working? Initially, when I started with Deloitte, I used to go to the office, and then I realized nobody actually even sees me in the office. Do I need to be in the office? Can I go to the gym? What is my boundaries for working? And it translated from me having these questions to start off with to 2 years later, I went into the office 10 times in 1 year. And I used to recruit partners and directors wearing my shorts, T-shirts, and flip-flops. And I came to realize that I could do my job wearing my shorts, T-shirts, and flip-flops. And that actually was a pretty good way of working for me. But you will have different employees that you are recruiting right now that may not function in that same way as I did, and may not like remote working, or you yourselves may not like remote working. And I think that this is part of what we're calling these interesting times for us. And a little bit about me, I think the most challenging thing I've ever had to do, besides make this presentation in 2 days, is I once agreed to do a presentation to 200 interns in Mandarin. So actually, I did go to university and I did learn Chinese, but I've never learned how to talk about what people's career aspirations were in Chinese. And at one point, I completely lost my nerves and my hands started flapping like a bird. And the compere had to tell me, "Jiao, jiao," and sort of like, go for it, be calm. But I think as well, one of the reasons why I share this with people is that I think our lives are learning curves. And I think it's up to us to continue to challenge ourselves and to take on new experiences. And this, again, is what this opportunity in COVID-19, despite its terrible tragedies to so many people, has also presented us with an opportunity to learn about what we do, what is fundamental to the good practices in what we do, and to think about how we want to do things better in the future as well. All right, next slide. So what is great candidate experience? I used to think about it to myself as, would I give myself a 5-star rating? And think about it in the sort of views of a TripAdvisor, an Airbnb, and Amazon. If somebody was to recruit me, to rate me as a recruiter, would I get a 5-star rating consistently? And I'll be really candid and very honest with you all. I don't think I would always get that 5 stars. Sometimes I'm a 3, sometimes I'm a 4, sometimes I've been a 1. But I think one of the things that I can share with you all, especially during remote hiring, is that you really need to be thinking about how to be that 5-star. Because with the remote employees, you are a really fundamental bridge to the process, to the understanding, to the onboarding. You are that kind of conduit for the person. And it really does, I think, make sense to reflect often to yourselves as to what is it I'm doing that's well? What worked well with this candidate? What hasn't worked well? And you don't need to wait for your surveys to go out. You can phone up your candidates. You can drop them a note and say, could I have done anything better for you? What is it that you think I did well? And what do you think I can do a bit better next time? And you can take those real-time surveys with yourself, and it doesn't cost you anything. It's just getting that kind of feedback, which I think we all actually at the end of the day appreciate. Next slide, please. So when I started working at Deloitte and I started being really a very remote recruiter, I started to think about what was that 5 great elements of candidate experience. Because most of my candidates I never met. In fact, I thought about it this morning. I actually only met 2 candidates. I built up a small team that was also geographically dispersed, and we used to have about 300 partners and directors that we looked at globally. And they would be, sat in Australia or in London, New York, wherever. And so it really made me think, because of those kind of candidates, what was going to make this experience better for them. And I kind of came up with 5 ideas for myself. One is to be positive and empathetic. And how you can translate this, especially at the moment, we all have stuff going on. As I said, I was a person that was red to start off with because I couldn't get my sound going. We have things that are distracting us. I often have a cat that would like to come and interrupt my calls. But you need to kind of think about, am I feeling good? Am I in the right shape? Am I going to be that person that somebody wants to talk to? And if you have stuff that's suddenly happening and it's distracting, it's okay to reschedule calls. And it's also okay that your candidates also have children screaming in the background, cats meowing, dogs barking, the door ringing. It's just what's happening right now. And it's for none of us to judge what's going on. The next is that with these processes, before, people could come to the office. They could kind of have a look maybe and see what's happening if they were recruiting in person. But now we have to be extremely clear and transparent, which is actually extremely difficult right now, because it could be that you're working in an organization that in the one side, for example, still needs to hire in very business critical areas, but at the same time, maybe doing things like retrenchments. So how do you explain to candidates where they may read in the newspapers that your firm is not doing terribly well, but you still need to recruit them? And it's up to us to be adults. It's really up to us to think about, how do we explain things in a way that shares the knowledge that we're able to, but in a way that gives people the opportunities to be able to make their decisions. The next thing is thinking about, how are you accessible and organized? I think for many of us, tools like Telegram, WhatsApp, Slack, everything, they've taken down a lot of boundaries. You see people responding to group chats at midnight, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning. And that sort of fear of missing out on digital communications, I think, is becoming very prevalent. But I will be perfectly honest with you all. I actually don't write the best text messages at 1 o'clock in the morning. I really should be sleeping. And I think one of the things that you can think about is how do you set yourself up to be accessible to your candidates? So if you're used to using WhatsApp or Telegram or whatever it is, do you tell them that you have office hours? Think about it like when you went to university. Do you tell them I'm available between I'm 8 to 1 or from 2 to 5 or I'm really good between 7 and 9? And do you ask them when is a good time to talk to them? Because sometimes it's not a good time. Sometimes people are distracted. But obviously, when people are changing jobs, they tend to be a bit nervous as well. They want to kind of have feedback. They want to be seen to doing the right thing. They want to be keen. But we all have to be kind of mindful about what boundaries do look like, especially when we're looking at people's living rooms. We're looking at what they're wearing today. It's a whole different ballgame, right? The next, I think, is being thoughtful and candidate-centric. Thoughtful to me, it makes me think about how do I build up that fun, that rapport with somebody? How do I give them that confidence that who I am and what I'm saying, that I'm somebody to be trusted? And as I was saying, last is to be human. Stuff happens and is happening. And I will share with you one funny thing that happened to me. I was once on a call and I had a candidate that was for a partner role, and he was sat in China, and I had a colleague of mine that was sat on the call, and they were sat in Hong Kong. And the call was going very well. We were getting towards the offer numbers. It was, this candidate was great. We were really excited. And then I looked at my cat, and my cat had a bird in its mouth, and the bird was still alive. And I screamed. I screamed extremely loudly down the phone. So I must have made them think I was an extremely crazy person. But I did explain that I just had my cat with a bird in its mouth. And the point of it is, and why I share it with you, is that stuff happens. I mean, I can't control my cat and it's running around the garden and it's just something that happened. Could I go back to doing my job? Yes. Did I get it sorted out? Yes. But it's just stuff that happens. All right. Thank you very much for the smiley emojis for that as well. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So if we drill down into what is our 5 elements. So as I said, being positive and empathetic, think about what is that A game that you have. Because when you go and get people to come into your offices, they can see, you have a cool lunch place. They can see that you've got nice spanky new furniture. You've got all of these things. But when it's you on the phone, it's like showtime. Do you know what I mean? It's showtime every time. So think about what is that A game, making sure that you are that person that other people want to be recruited by, that you know what their jobs are, that you know who they are, that you're thinking very clearly, that you're able to share as much about that role as you can, that you know the manager, the department, and you can also explain what you think about what's the ways of working and what is the remote ways of working. Because it's really lonely, I can tell you, having been there, when you onboard into a role and you're remote. What is it I do? How do I do these things? What is the template guide? How do people make decisions? It's not clear because you can't go and stand next to somebody and have a quiet chit chat. And I think what's also interesting, and I talked to quite a few people before I did this presentation, is really understanding what are candidate drivers right now. And I see 3 main areas. I see people at the moment that are quite stable. So if you're sort of proactively approaching candidates, they're the people that right now don't have the mindset to kind of change because they just are dealing with what's going on. And it is really very different what is going on now in terms of COVID-19. The next you see is candidates who are more opportunistic. So for some candidates, suddenly they don't have to travel and they have more time actually on their hands than they've ever had before. So thinking about it for them, they actually can now start to think about opportunities which they never had before. And it's interesting, I talked to a friend of mine who works in recruiting yesterday, and he was telling me that he'd spoken to a senior partner at a Big Four. And she said to him, I've been here for 15 years, and this is the first time I've ever had the opportunity to sit down and have a think about what's in it for me. And that's quite interesting because we're not thinking about sometimes what is the upside of these situations. And finally, we do have a lot of really good, seriously talented people right now who are on the market. They are looking for jobs because they've been retrenched. And I think with those candidates, we really have to be mindful that at the end of the day, they are looking for jobs, the clearer that we can give them feedback, the clearer that we can be to them so that they can move to the right opportunities, the better it is all around. And again, understanding different markets and different dynamics. So obviously, I know if I put a roll up and it's a software engineer in India, I'm going to get 900 applicants in 4 days. That's never going to happen in Japan. I may get 2 responses if I'm very lucky. But right now, we've got different markets and very different dynamics in terms of some markets are coming out of lockdown, some markets are coming back into lockdown, some places have got different dynamics going on in terms of labor regulations and things like that. And I think it's really doing your homework around where is it I am looking and what am I looking for and how will that impact right now? I think it's extremely important. Talking about clear and transparent, I know I've covered some of this stuff earlier. One of the pet peeves I have as well is I think we're now all thinking a lot more clearly about online assessments, online feedback. Online assessments and feedback is great in terms of being able to create a structured process, but it is not free to our candidates' time. So one of the things that we really need to make sure that we're doing as we're taking our candidates through these processes is really ensuring that they are getting that kind of feedback. So if you make somebody do an hour-long test, make sure that you give them the feedback. If the test is not going to show that they're going to get that role, you need to give them some guidance as to what they're perhaps missing. It's part of what we can do that also really positively impacts our brands. The more that we seem like we are the representatives of the great companies that people want to work for, the more that they will consider us in the future. And if you have the opportunity to be able to be that better recruiter now, you will pay dividends for yourself later. Also, again, as I mentioned, right now, it's a very complex environment for our business leaders. 1 minute they think that business is going very well. Now we're into this. What is revenue in Q3? Can I sell? Can I do this? Can I do that? And what could have been really important hiring last week suddenly is off the cards, right? It's not so important. So thinking about then, how do you explain delays in the process? And the funny thing is, again, talking to people, I'm seeing 2 different things. Some people are getting delayed and very long recruitment processes, and some people are being able to have recruitment processes that move very quickly because suddenly they can get everybody's time. But again, you need to be able to explain to people that actually you don't know the same things sometimes as you could do before, and things are changing, but you will do your best job to tell them what's going on. In talking about accessibility and organized, another kind of interesting feedback I got from somebody is they were telling me that they had a remote interview and they were really upset about it. They weren't upset that the interview was remote, that's fine. What they were upset about was technical issues. And a lot of the times we do have technical issues. WhatsApp is for free, it does cut out, there's all sorts of things that could go wrong. And what he felt really upset about is he kept saying to the person, I really can't hear you very well. And he was very convinced the other person couldn't hear him. But the person on the other end of the call didn't reschedule. They didn't say, okay, if this is making you feel uncomfortable, this call, let me just pause it now and let's reschedule. So one of the things I would make sure that you're very positive with when you start talking to your candidates as well is talking about what is your strategy for technical issues. So if somebody has problems or they've got like disconnect or whatever, you just say, it's okay, it's cool. Let's pause it for now. Let's come back. Whereas the fun and the thoughtfulness and the candidate stuff is, I think we can kind of think about how to use technology to build up social chemistry. So I know we talk about WhatsApp groups, but WhatsApp groups, what are they for? They're for social chemistry in a sense. They're not just for like, hey, do this, do that, do the other. And when you think about when you've got your candidates in play or you've got your new hires coming on board, thinking about how do you use tools like a WhatsApp or a Telegram to create that social chemistry. Because the wonderful thing about these tools is you don't need to write properly. You don't need grammar. You can put emojis in and they make it so much less formal, especially compared to sometimes like Zoom where, you sat there and it's looking like the Brady Bunch. You know what I mean? Everybody's in their little boxes and things like that. WhatsApp takes away the boxes. If you looked at my WhatsApp picture, it's me doing a headstand in yoga. It's obviously clearly not what I do at work. But people have a different impression of me because they see me doing headstands in my yoga picture in my WhatsApp. And that's fine with me. That's what I want them to have, right? But thinking about how do you create that social chemistry around the tools that you're using? And as I said, be human, stuff happens. I've had my cat interrupt me on calls. I've had my cat interrupt me in interviews. I was once having a year-end performance and I was very convinced I heard the cat meowing. And do you know what I found? I found the cat in the room with a bird again. And that was when I was doing my year-end review with my manager. So stuff happens. It's okay. You just say it's happened. Okay? All right. Shall we move on to the next slide? So how do you reinvent the digital recruiting experience? So I think what we all like to do is we like to jump into problems. Or what happens is we get vendors sending us lots of emails. And I can tell you in my last job, in an average week, I would get about 10 to 15 vendors saying, could they have a cup of coffee with me because they've got a new AI tool, they've got a new chatbot, they've got a new auto scheduling, they've got everything that's new. And that's wonderful. I mean, I've been an entrepreneur. I value entrepreneurship. I love technology. I really do. But I don't have time for that. And I don't know if it's always going to solve my problems. So one of the things I think you have to do when you start thinking about what is your digital experience and what you want to create is to think about what are the problems that you're trying to solve first. So maybe it might be TA resources. So, for example, nobody's going to be increasing budgets probably right now in terms of what your headcount looks like or your contractor headcount looks like. So what tools can you use to augment your processes? Maybe you need to let go of your recruitment coordinators or whatever that looks like. Maybe you have technology issues in the sense that your technology is archaic. It's just not working very well for you, or it isn't streamlined into where you need to be. So thinking through what that is. Maybe you have disjointed processes. So for example, your recruiters are living in their ATS and then they get to background checks and it's here. Maybe they're getting to offers, it's there. Maybe it's coming here, maybe it's there. And maybe what you want to be able to do is create efficiencies by streamlining. I think one of the challenges that a lot of people face right now, unless they're using tools like Aperture or whatever, is that they are having troubles with tracking candidate pools and tracking candidate pools of people that have not applied for jobs. And then thinking about how do I create that TA that presents competitive intelligence? And it's not easy within our ATS structures. But in some of what you do and in some of your markets, you should really know your competitive talent. So thinking about what kind of tools those look like. You could have two other problems. You could be too many applicants or too little applicants. Too little applicants creates its own set of problems within it. And then within that, you're going to have budget. And right now, I think all of us are pretty aware that it's unlikely that you're going to get bigger budgets right now. So whatever you do, you need to be very thoughtful and very mindful around what is that ROI. So again, thinking about, first of all, what is that digital experience and what are you trying to create? And some of it may be solutions that you're trying to solve for just regular recruiting, let alone thinking about remote recruiting, okay? So let's move to the next slide. And then from there, my suggestion is before you go and buy lots of tools and make lots of shopping, is you start to think about what is that TA function going to be like. So you don't need to be a mind reader. You don't need to know that what's going to happen in 5 years' time or 10 years' time. But what you need to have is a sense of what could you look like in 2 years' time. And for me, that sense of seeing of what I look for in 2 years' time, I use things like SMART goals. Just saying I want to be the best TA team in APAC is very woolly. Nobody will buy into that. So if I say I want to be the best TA team and I want to do this number of hires, I want to do them in this kind of time frame, I'm going to do my white collar hiring like this, my exec talent like this, my operators or whatever that looks like for you there. I am going to have this amount of headcount. I want to be known for doing this in terms of competitive intelligence. I'm going to do these things. And you pick it up. And you can do it in a kind of design thinking kind of structure as well. And because TA does not live in a silo, let's be clear, TA is the most famous area of HR. Nobody talks about comp and benefits in the same way that they talk about TA. Everybody has a view on TA in your organization. So when you're creating your vision, you want to be socializing that vision. And it's very interesting when you socialize your vision, lots of people have this view that somehow the tools that you have right now, you can do more with them than you can actually now. So a lot of people think that you're sitting on candidates, that you're not doing this, and you're not doing that. So having that clear conversation around what is my present capabilities and my present tech capabilities and my present digital capabilities, and where do I need to get to, actually helps people to understand what your problems are, because they don't necessarily understand TA problems. And what I found over the years is every time I say the word TA database to people, they just like close their eyes. So you have to think about how to make that relevant to them and what you can do. And then within that, you need to then go back to what your problems are and think about prioritizing. So when you've got your goals together, you've got your alignment with your stakeholders, then it's taking that step back and saying, these are my priorities and these are my spending numbers. And again, TA doesn't just live in by itself. You are obviously part of the HR team. So you need to be thinking about, where does this fit up in your HR operating model? What is it you need from your HR ops team? Where is it you need from comp and benefits or total rewards? Or where does that sit with your HR business partners? Because HR business partners, the funniest line I ever heard about HR business partners is this: when HR business partners do recruiting, there is no complaints. When TA does recruiting, that's when you hear noise. So you really have to make sure that you are bringing them along with the same ride as you, because that's when, if you're misaligned, and let's say you have a HR team that's very used to doing things like reviewing salary offers and discussing the last lack with you, and you now want to implement a system where your recruiters are going to be able to take that authority and give them some sort of leeway, you're going to get all sorts of pushback. All right, next slide, please. Now, tech. So as I said, I'm very passionate about tech, and I very much appreciate when Esther has her tech conferences, and I found some amazing technology at this conferences. I got quite enamored last year at the one that she had in Singapore, which was this group that was doing an AI telephone system for being able to phone up candidates, and they were saying that they could do it in many languages, but I'm not sure it could kind of work. So let me tell you what I look for tech. So as I'm telling you, I'm a person that vendors come to a lot, with a lot of great ideas, but I'm obviously somebody that already has an ecosystem. I can't just put tech in anywhere. So what the first thing is that I will look at when I look at my digital roadmap and I look about what I'm trying to achieve or what I want to do, is I'll first think about what is easy to integrate. Not what's cool, but what is easy to integrate. Because there is nothing worse than, let's say you're in a Workday environment and then you have some really good tech that comes to you, but they have no proof of concept on Workday. That would therefore mean that they have to spend, and if they're a small startup, tens of thousands of dollars to get a proof of concept on Workday to prove that they can work with Workday before you can even look to integrate it. So what would be a short-term solution or quick solution, you find takes several months, because there's a lot of back and forth that needs to go on. And you then become almost this champion for this tech that just kind of seemed interesting, but suddenly now you've got to go and work with Workday or SuccessFactors or whoever it is. So I would say, as a rule of thumb, choose things that are easy to use and choose vendors that are already working with your ecosystem. Because otherwise you're going to find that you're going to spend a lot of time chasing up, trying to implement something, which at the end of the day, you may not yet know if it's going to be successful in your environment. Next, when you look at tech, think about, how does it integrate? Every recruiter I've ever met is a busy person. If none of you guys are busy, you are like the most unique recruiters in the entire universe. Everybody's busy. And most people do not understand what recruiting now entails, all the administration functions that now come into recruiting. Nobody has any concept of. And recruiters are tired. They're in an ATS, they may have a couple of tools, and then you say, here's this new cool tool. It's really amazing, but you need a separate login for it. And then you need to go and click on these lines, and then you're going to click, click, click. And they're already distracted. They've already got too much to do. So it means that your chances of people actually buying into what you're suggesting is going to be reduced. So again, thinking about this easy to integrate, smoothness as well. The next thing, guys, I look for is regular support and a strong customer success focus. Everybody wants to sell me stuff, but does everybody want to support me being successful in implementing their stuff? And to me, that implementation and that customer success is really key, because from it, I can learn about what other clients are doing. And I would say that there's one video job video interviewing company. And I haven't learned so much from them, but what I've learned a lot from is their other clients and what they've told me their clients have done with the systems, and learning from their white papers and things like that. And it made me really think about things very differently about candidates. So I'd say that, the strong customer success and success that you can access, that's easy to get hold of, somebody that really is, vested in making you successful. The next thing I try and stay away from is orphan tech. So you may wonder, what is orphan tech? And I have to say, I made it up today as a phrase, or yesterday. Orphan tech, to me, is traditionally tech which comes in when a big vendor wants to create a suite of systems. So they'll have like a total rewards, they'll have an L&D component, they have all of these different things. And then somehow they have a recruiting module. And then what happens is when group IT, CHRO get together, they go, wow, this is amazing. This tech solves everything. But what happens with the orphan tech is if the module is not created properly, is it never properly syncs. So you may have that tech sits on one cloud, it's not properly integrated, or maybe the tech wasn't actually designed from a recruiting perspective. So it's really more like a HRIS tool as opposed to a candidate tracking tool. And I think we're all aware that some of the systems are very poor in terms of things like candidate selection, or even very fundamental issues like showing whether one recruiter has clicked on a resume or not. So again, being clear, is this orphan tech? Is this real tech? What kind of tech is it for me? And then you want to choose tech that your recruiters adore and they want to buy into. At the end of the day, some tools are so cool and they're so wonderful. And then if you're stuck on a clunky ATS, which nobody likes, guess what? When the market picks up, guess where they're going to run to? It won't be staying with you. And I think really what's happening right now is the haves and have-nots of technology is very interesting. If you're in an environment where you're not exploring chatbots, you're not exploring AI, you're not thinking about how to recruit better, you are being left behind by companies that are really thinking. And it doesn't mean that they're implementing everything, because again, as I was saying, you need to look through this list. Is it easy to integrate? Can I easily put it on? Will it actually work? But you need to be thinking about, wow, where are we going? And you also want to get tech that delights your candidates and your stakeholders. I think we've all had enough of candidates that talk about how difficult is it to me to do my application. Candidates love, and I think that Indeed has done quite a lot of research around this, they love systems which are easy to be able to put their applications in. And stakeholders value, especially hiring managers, they value having systems where they can access candidate records themselves so that they can look at resumes. There's nothing more frustrating for a hiring manager that's got a number of open requisitions that he doesn't know what the candidate pool looks like because he can't see it. So thinking it through from all these kind of different things as well. And nobody wants to buy the tech that nobody is going to wear. I mean, I'm a really big online shopper. I shop at about 11 o'clock at night and I buy lots of different things. And I would say 90% of the purchases that I buy are really good and 10% are really not right. And I end up sending them back. So really thinking through, is this the tech that's going to be that 90% or is it going to be that 10% that Rachel's going to send back in the mail because she realized she doesn't look good in purple and orange? All right, next slide, please. So again, stick to your HR tech roadmap and stay away from the shiny objects. So as I'm saying, use my shopping analogy. Just because it seems cool, just because it seems great, doesn't mean that you are in the right place right now for it. Maybe you need to solve some of your more fundamental issues. And again, look at those problem statements. If you have a lack of candidates, putting in an automated sourcing tool will not solve that. What will solve that is looking at your employer branding issues. And when you're looking at people like your remote hiring, thinking about what is the tools that you need for them. Is it that you have the right kind of software in terms of being able to do video interviewing, or in terms of like being able to do things like online tests easily? Some tests are very, very laborious. They may take over an hour and a half, which is fine if you're like me and I'm sat here in Singapore and I'm on broadband and I'm on the top of the line system in Singapore. But for some candidates, really the best they've got is their mobile phone. And it's really very challenging for them to be able to do some of these tests. And what's more is that you're getting them to go through their data plans as well. So thinking about, going back to what I'm saying, that great candidate experience, being thoughtful and mindful. Do these tests actually serve the purpose that we're looking for? And are they going to be the right things? And again, thinking very clearly about what is your ROI? What is going to be your licensing model? Some stuff is extremely expensive. Some of the best kind of onboarding stuff is actually pretty pricey. Can you afford it? Some of the tools are really, you would need to be thinking about, do I actually want to rearrange my team differently? Because if I buy this tech, then I'm not going to be able to afford the licenses for everybody. So I don't want all my recruiters complaining that you love this recruiter more than that recruiter. What I then need to think about is, how do I realign my team so that we can be successful together? All right, next slide. Thank you. Okay, that slide came out slightly differently now. All right, so what can be your approach to your TA roadmap? So as I'm going, think about what is your foundational tag. So to me, foundational tag is that approach that you can get to from your corporate careers page, and then having those easy to update careers pages. And I would say right now, update your careers pages. If your careers pages are full of smiley people in the office and like waving away to themselves, people are not in the office right now, right? So if you've got the opportunity to update your careers pages, put pictures of people working from home, or talking about working from home, or talking about your employee experiences working from home. Update it, because we are updating. That is about being agile, right? And then thinking about, in a normal foundational tech, thinking about how you create offer letters, how you do requisitions, candidate ranking tools, most important, and I think very important in India, because I think a lot of people end up using tools like some of the big jobs boards, because the actual ranking systems is much better in the stack system than on the ATSs. But at the end of the day, is there ways that you can improve what is your own ATS? Thinking about then, how do you track things like line and HR approvals, generate offer letters, collect candidate documents, and basic onboarding. And then again, thinking about foundational, to me, is like, how do you do things like interns, whether they're at an online career fair or offline, referrals, executive, niche talent, all this kind of stuff. I think auto calendars as well, and auto replies is also now something that we should regard as foundational. For remote hiring, then I think you need to be thinking about more integrated communication platforms. And there are a number of systems out there now. And why do I passionately think about integrated communication platforms? Is because whilst it's great that I've got WhatsApp, and maybe Esther can communicate with me on WhatsApp, and we're having lovely conversations with one another, at the end of the day, my organization has no idea what we were talking about. And then with that, it's like any recruiting which you cannot capture. You are missing tons of information. So the more that you can try and think about looking at what tools can you use for remote hiring in terms of communications, so that then you can capture with what was the candidate comms to you, what was your comms to the candidate. So in case if there's any issues with salaries later on, or there's this or that, it's really clear what was going on. I think also, like I'm saying, is sort of like updating your sort of like careers pages, but also like virtual office tours. So eventually somebody may come to your office and want to see what it looks like, or thinking about VR interviews. One of the things that I really liked in Deloitte, which we did, and it really was part of how I transitioned from becoming that remote employee, is we had a lot around organization and culture tools. So what is the culture now that we are remote? But what is your in-person culture as well? So getting people, there are tools to look at that, to get people to understand, what does culture mean to me? Because it's different things mean different things to different people. And to share, when I worked at Deloitte, we'd had a whole thing around, what does working mean to us? What's the times that we kind of work? What is the right ways of working? How do we view global? How do we get to know one another? What is the kind of personality frameworks that we look at? How do we kind of talk ideas and things like that? It was really very helpful. And then I think you could kind of think about things like specialist onboarding tools. Onboarding is something that we all love to talk about. Onboarding is, at the end of the day, something where we know that if we onboard people poorly, that it will affect their retention, right? But I think it's one of the areas that we're doing the worst jobs on, to be honest. I don't think we think creatively enough about it. I don't think we think dynamically enough about it. But for your remote employees, it's extremely important, because they are the people that this is the only way that they're going to kind of understand to start off with, am I onboarding? Okay, next slide. So moving into onboarding, let's talk about e-onboarding and aligning candidates to your corporate culture. So again, what is your corporate culture in a HQ could be entirely different to what it is in a remote environment. And I really have been that person that's gone to work. I don't normally wear a green and white hat, but I really have been that person that's gone to work on my birthday and nobody's wished me happy birthday because they didn't know who I was. Do you know what I mean? I was a remote employee. I had to go into the office on my birthday. There's nobody. And whereas these are the easy things that we know when we're in person with each other. It's the stuff that we don't know. So you have to kind of think about what is it that you can share? And going back to that great candidate experience, what is it that you can share as well when you're talking to candidates that's relevant to them, even if they're going to be working remotely? Sorry, next slide. Next slide, please. All right. So when I was thinking about this, and I spent quite a lot of time earlier this year working on onboarding, I actually came up with what I call my own framework. So this is not scientifically proven to work. There is no studies on it. There's no vaccination against my framework. There's nothing. But I wanted to come up with an easy framework for people to be able to understand what could be the components of good onboarding. And so I called it COAST. And I think the 4 elements to it are very simple. It's personal. It's personal and it's relevant to the needs of your remote hire. And for somebody like me, I love getting corporate t-shirts. I have to tell you, I love corporate t-shirts. I love the mugs. I love the bags. I love all of it. It makes me visually identify with where I work with. And I think it's important to a number of people. But different people will have different ideas of what's their personalness and what they want from you. So thinking through what is personal. Operational covers what and how to do their role. So what is the fundamental things that they need to do their role? And that could be like your 30, 60, 90 day, but it could also be like, what do you expect from me to do my job? You know, very sensible things. Strategic. Strategic gives us insight into the organization strategy and ongoing activities. So you could say, well, they could have read the annual report. We do news briefings. Here's an intranet, blah, blah, blah. But that is just the external strategy. There is something I think in most organizations called the internal strategy. And the internal strategy has a lot of lingo with it that to an outsider, they have no idea about. So suddenly they hear about Project Fluffy, Project Doom, Project Runway, Project whatever, and they have no idea what you're all talking about. And it's thinking about how do you give people that insight into what's going on in your organization and what's the internal organization pulse points as well as of activities. And technical, providing the tools to do their role. So I asked a number of people, you know, what's changed for you with onboarding with COVID-19? And do you know what the number one response was? I'm sure you will do. We can courier laptops. And it's like, woohoo, we courier laptops now. Well, I have worked in organizations where it was actually very difficult to get laptops for new employees. So I do understand that that's something to be celebrated. But it's more than that. If that's the one thing that we can celebrate is we can get people laptops, we are failing. You know, I can go and put my phone on and I can get like food delivered in 20 minutes. And if that's the only thing that we think we're doing well is giving people laptops and logins, we have got to think a lot more deeply around what is onboarding and what do people need in e-onboarding as well. So let's go to the next slide. So what normally happens, I think, when people come up with an onboarding plan is they classify it over days. They say, it's pre-onboarding, it's day 1, it's day 7, it's day 30, it's day 90, it's day 180, it's day whatever. And then what happens is it's a bit like shopping, is they come up, they do like a grid, and they put day 1, and they put welcome, then they put lunch, then they put meet and greet, then they put for day 2, learn where something is, or pre-onboarding, they say, send them a welcome pack. That is random. That's just like feel good. That's just saying, I've got 5 things here, I've got 5 things there, I've got 5 things there. And really, if you thought about it robustly, it's what kindergarten children should be able to do. My thought process, especially when I start to think about this concept of posts, is that you need to create your own periodic elements table for your company. So this is one I made up, so it may not be the right one for your company, but it's one that you can kind of think of, and you can look at it, where am I checking my boxes? So you could start off by saying A is for acronyms. There is no organization in the whole of APAC or globally that doesn't have its own acronyms. Everybody has their own MFP, ASP, STDs, whatever, right? So you need to be able to give your remote employees the list of the acronyms that you use. Your B is for your buddies, right? Buddies is important. Where are you going to put buddies into the framework? C is for compliance. Where does compliance come in? And compliance isn't just that first little training that says, like, don't accept gifts over $50. Compliance is everywhere. And what happens and what's your internal and external rules vary between companies. My favorite is F is for filing for expenses. I'm probably booking travel, but we don't need to book travel. It's become amazingly clear to me over the years that Concor is implemented very differently in different organizations. And people need to know how to learn how to file expenses, as they need to learn how to order business cards, how to do a lot of different things. So what is your F going to be for? And one of the clearest things that actually new employees need to know is T is for templates. And you know why that is? It's because at the end of the day, the first decks that you do, you don't know what your slides need to look like. You don't know what is the right way of doing things. You don't know where the photos go. You don't know where any of it goes. So a T is for templates is actually really important. So as I said, this may not be the right chart for your organization, but understanding what is your periodic table for your organization is very important to being able to think about then, how do I translate that into an onboarding program? What does that post look like? Where is the personal? Where is the operational? Where is the strategic? And where are the technical elements? I mean, as well, things like, how do we work? So right now as well, when you think about it remotely, how you make decisions may be very differently to how you make them in person. So you need to be kind of thinking through this. And when you cut it as well, think about, will my onboarding always look differently for this kind of group of employees, my remote employees? Will I now have an onboarding for them for transitioning back to the office? What would that onboarding look like? Does that look differently again to my exec onboarding or whoever? So I hope this is some good ideas for you all as well. Next, as I've said, we then move that. So if you have an activity like this, so next slide. You then do your post plan with what's personal and positive. I think is one of the most important things. But I need to let you all know something that's a secret. So normally we kind of talk about, thinking about that first day. And on the first day, maybe your new hire needs to spend half an hour to go to security to get a badge. Maybe they have to spend 40 minutes in a meeting room listening to about employee benefits. Maybe they spend 1 hour with group IT. Maybe they spend an hour getting lost going to the bathroom. They do all these things. When you're a remote employee, you typically know where the bathroom is in your own house. It's pretty normal. So suddenly what happens is that your remote employees have more time on that first day than they would normally do, because they don't need to do all the social activities that are actually part of normally starting a job. So when you think about that pre-onboarding, you could be thinking about your welcome packs, the laptops, the lock-ins, for me, corporate t-shirts, mugs, and mouse pads, thinking about how you schedule out that regular check-in and assigning buddies. But day one, you could really be starting to talk about and helping your hiring managers to think about, how do I make this person productive? Because the number one way that people start to enjoy their jobs is actually by being productive. And studies have shown that the retention increases the quicker that you can make people productive. So bring that productivity in sooner. You don't want to overwhelm people, of course, on their first day and talk to them about how do you do procurement, because you may scare them off in some organizations. But thinking about, how can I help you do your job? Because that's going to make them feel more settled and feel more part of the family than just sticking to, let's have a one-to-one, right? Another important thing is to make sure that they're on the communication channels which you're working with. So whether that's the Slack, it's a Microsoft Teams, or whatever else, getting that whole thing together. Because what you forget is that people are nosy, and they're inquisitive, and that's the best thing about new employees. So they will start to review those kind of information themselves to find out, what are you talking about, what do you do, and things like that. So make sure that you give them those logins, make sure that they feel like they're part of the family so that they can get going as well. And I think one of the other things to think about as well is whether it's the hiring manager, the line manager, or whatever else, it's not just a regular check-in with people, but you may want to do a much more structured check-in about what's your new hire reflection. So what have you learned this week? What do you think you want to learn? Because you can change onboarding. This is the nice thing now, because we're in this new age of things a bit different, is that onboarding doesn't have to look as systematic. So at the end of the day, if you get to the end of week 1 and somebody has no idea about some things, you can talk to people and see about, can we change things up? Can we do something differently? Or whatever that looks like. So again, this is just a sample idea, but what I suggest is you go back to the idea of the periodic table. You make your periodic table, you may add to your periodic table, but you know you at least have 26 steps in a periodic table, right? From my A to Z, the way I've done it. And then you blow that out across whatever is the time frames, but you add in an element of flexibility as well to it so that people can see what they can do differently. All right, next slide, please. So wrapping up, and I hope that this session has been useful for everybody. What did we talk about first? We talked about that great candidate experience and incorporating that 5 elements into creating it. And as I'm saying, with remote recruiting, you really are that conduit. You really are part of the star of the show. So please get up in the mornings and be stars, because I know you all are. And think about, what is that recruiting star going to look like for you? The next thing is, with digital recruiting, know your problems. It's like, know your client in KYC, but know what your problems are, and don't just try and fix short-term problems. Because sometimes when you just try and fix something in the short term, it becomes a bigger problem for you. And when you think about what's the problem for your remote hires, think about it in the contextual way of how can they deal with things. So at the end of the day, if you have like a very convoluted online assessment like we're talking about, and it's not mobile friendly, is that the right thing to do? And think about as well, for some candidates right now, I actually had a scare myself. I had to print off a number of documents for here, and my printer wasn't working. And I didn't even know how to get my printer repaired because we're on lockdown, right? So you need to be able to think about right now very simple problems. Like, if we require you to print your offer letter and send it and scan it back, does every single candidate have a print and a scanner? Maybe not, right? Anyway. Be tech savvy. As I said, do not be like I am, where I buy 10% of my clothes and I'm like, why did I buy that? Think about how will this tech impact your environment? How will it make it better? How is it easy for you to integrate? Because you're a busy person, right? I think every single one of you is busy, and it's amazing somebody got up at Nigeria at 4 o'clock in the morning to listen to me, but you're busy too, right? We're all busy. So the tech that we need to bring in, we need to be mindful about how it integrates, how it comes into our systems, what kind of resources do we need from other people to be able to integrate it properly. And then thinking about how do we ensure that people are adoring it, that they're using it, because there's nothing worse than buying a cool software and then your recruiters don't like it. And then finally, thinking about e-onboarding and cultural alignment, thinking about post, personal, operational, strategic, and technical. Looking at all the elements that you can create your periodic table for your organization, and thinking about how do you bring that into your onboarding, and thinking about then how would you create maybe afterwards an onboarding for going back to the office for people who've never been in the office. All right. Okay. With that, the next slide is questions. So I don't know if anybody's got any questions for me.
So, Rachel, we have lots of questions, and I'm afraid we're running out of time. So I'll have to prioritize. And I didn't want to interrupt you in your flow because everyone was chatting and loving every minute of your session. So I think everyone will agree with me that we went on for an
I'm so sorry.
fine. I think we were loving every minute of it. So don't worry about that. So I'm going to take the first question that's been upvoted by everyone, which is the measure bar. And I think we are always been kind of put that spotlight about how are we measuring candidate experience and how has that changed? So if you can just give us a little bit of an overview about how to crack that measurability and how do we know we're on the right track when it comes to candidate experience.
So I think there's a number of tools out there right now, isn't there, in terms of like looking at, you think about Qualtrics and things like that, in terms of looking at assessing feedback. I think, though, what you have to do is move that assessment earlier into the process. Just getting candidates to look at it at the end is a waste of time. I think normally I've seen response rates of about 5%, 5 to 10%. So if I do 5,000 hires a year, I will be lucky if I get about 400 responses.
Yeah.
So the thought process is that I believe is like bringing it in earlier. I also think, we also have to think, like I said, about less formal channels. At the end of the day, it's all great that we can digitize everything and we can capture every data. And it's good that, we can show our bosses, our CHROs, that, we have a 95% approval rating. But the insight that we need is the stuff that's probably posted sometimes on Glassdoor. It's the stuff that people don't feel so comfortable sharing, or it's the conversations that you need to have with people and just say, hey, how am I doing with my job?
Yeah.
Can I do better? Can I do things better? I did as well, sorry, to think about on candidate experience. I think what I've worked out before is there's about several steps where you can look at how to do some sort of pulse check. But what I would suggest is that you don't do several steps. You work out what is your key priority of about 2 to 3, because the other thing that you don't want is candidates to get survey fatigue. And I've seen it before where people have been sent responses saying, how are we doing? And they've never even heard from a hiring manager. So they don't even know what to tell you. It's like, what are you asking me?
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful. Thank you, Rachel. Thanks so much. Hey, hi everyone, and welcome back to the second part of this masterclass. And I can see many of you were able to join a table. So we have over 450 leaders attending this masterclass. So many of you were able to join a table. Some of you, unfortunately, I can see there were some challenges and some issues. We'll try to see if we can fix them for the second breakout room. So my apologies for that. So we're moving now to the second section, which is the case study on virtual hiring and onboarding. And we have the privilege to have with us Poonam Yadav, who is the group head talent staffing at Aditya Birla Group. Poonam leads the talent acquisition and employer branding for Aditya Birla Group, and she looks after leadership hiring for the group and also been instrumental to build the employer brand from the group perspective and strengthen that over the years. So very warm welcome, Poonam, and thank you for being with us this morning.
Thank you, Esther, and good morning to everybody. Hope you all had a very wonderful session. In fact, for me also, I took away a couple of learnings from Rachel. I really love the periodic table that she had put up, and that's something which was completely new. But unlike Rachel, I guess when the lockdown happened, it caught all of us with surprise. And there was a lot of confusion that happened, and we were not used to working without the office infrastructure. All of us had, yes, a laptop, each one of us had, and connectivity and bandwidth. But how do you kind of onboard candidates? What do you do about it? Candidates were joining. We had our campus interns coming on in the next week. It did create a lot of confusion for us. The initial 2 weeks was more about how do you manage things virtually, and for us it was completely new experiment. How are we going to go forward on all this, because overall this new normal of working without the office infrastructure that we had taken for granted all the time was completely new. Okay, with the laptop, and like Rachel said, you can't sign offer letters, you can't kind of do anything, but luckily at Aditya Birla Group, me and my team, what we focus on is how do you kind of keep ahead. And we had invested a lot in technology. Around 2 years back, we actually were doing the full talent staffing digitization across the group. The need at that time was more about how do we have one system for all our candidates across our various lines of businesses, to kind of, so that our recruiters, we are not different recruiters from different business are not talking to the same candidate. We should have some sort of a candidate history. So we had invested into a applicant tracking system pretty early online. Our challenge was not about the not having the technology. Actually, 2 years back, it was more about driving adoption for the technology.
Yeah.
And I actually feel that with this work from home, it has really helped us and move our adoption journey almost like 10 years ahead or 5 years ahead as such for us, because our challenges was how do you get the recruiters to use the system.
Yeah.
People were breaking their habits of using the email, the Excel, and everything. But how do you kind of get, so that was our challenge for us. It was more of a silver lining, the adoption of technology, because now you didn't have anything else. You had to access the system and continue the work from home, the recruitment from home. We already had our system fully integrated with video interviews, psychometric assessments, and all those things. So earlier, people were kind of we had to actually push people to say, "Can we have this all the transactions on the system?" But now, I guess it becomes easy.
Yeah.
And the best part of it was in this till March, we were actually in a transition of our ATS, and our new ATS went live in the month of April. So we are actually seeing a lot of adoption happening on the new applicant tracking system. So that is basically for us. It was more of a confusion, and we don't mm, anticipate to stay remote. So for us, it was like a lot of quick fixes that we had to do on an immediate basis, and that's what I wanted to kind of talk to you as to what did we go about and how did we go about doing it at Aditya Birla Group, and what is it that we wanted. So our objective was very clear. Candidate experience is key. So if candidate experience comes before the employee experience, before the person comes on board, but how do you ensure that you maintain the candidate experience in spite of whatever transactions you are doing? Because now you can't impress them with your fancy offices and what it is. You have to make do of what you are. Like Rachel said, it's you and it's showtime. And how do you do? A lot of our recruiters were not equipped. So when we kind of got into it and said, okay, what is it that we want to create in terms of experience? What is it that we want to? So we actually started from a larger employer brand perspective, and then came to the experience. And when you say, and I guess that's where the marketing comes into the recruitment actually, is how do you deliver the experience to it?
Yeah.
And the experience is the
So
main.
just about Poonam, if you want the slides with you at this moment, or you want to first set a little bit of the context first
I
before?
just want to set the context and then I'll answer.
Oh,
Yeah.
all right. Please go ahead.
So, what is the experience? Now, we have all seen Apple, Amazon, and people creating experience, people talking about experience. But what is it? What is an experience actually about? Candidate experience? Is it about sending mails in the right format? What is it exactly? Communicating out promptly, transparently? What exactly? So finally, we actually agreed experience is something which is basically meeting the and demands that have not even been stated in a candidate's mind, and how do you kind of go about it. So that's where we kind of got into more of a discussion within our team to understand what is it and what do we want to kind of do. Many a times when we talk about employer brand, Akansha, you may want to bring on to the presentation now. So I just wanted to walk you through as to how did we go about it. Of course, in this current pandemic, every organization has their own limitations. All of us are in our own boats. So what worked for us may not actually work for everybody. Each company has to decide what is best for them. But a lot of time I found in terms of the understanding of what employer brand is always missing, and therefore the what candidate experience is also missing. So we have done out here redefining our employer brand in the new context. Basically, what are going to be our channels of communication? What is the target audience that we want to kind of look at, and what is it we want to do? We want to create the employees, the candidates, consultants, customers, all talking about the Aditya Birla employer brand. So for that, we had to understand the candidate decision journey. Where does the candidate experience start? It starts even before the person is thinking about changing a job. And does the person actually know about it? How do you create it? So what you do and say, we can say whatever good things about our brand, but it's not what people will actually believe. People will actually believe what our employees are saying, what our candidates are saying, what our consultants are saying, what our customers are saying. One bad customer experience also can impact anybody's influence to join the Aditya Birla Group. So how is it that in this virtual world, how do we kind of bring out. And this is the whole framework we kind of put together to identify what are the touch points, where do we want to kind of make the changes, and what changes we want to make. So yeah, so the first step is understanding the candidate's mind. And I'm talking mainly, I know in India, a lot of people know what Aditya Birla Group is, but for any company, like the first thing on awareness is, who is this company anyway? What do they do? Is it really good? Then the consideration, how do I learn more about this organization, is the phase. So basically, it's one is they should know your company. The second is they should hear good things about your company for them. And if they want to learn more about your organization, then what is it and where can they find that information is something which we really want to do. What actions, if somebody is interested in joining a company, like what are the actions that they can take to show? Of course, the career website is the best, but nowadays it is more about social media. In fact, we receive more applications from LinkedIn as such. Then of course it's an equal thing. It's a candidates market. It's not just the organization market. They are evaluating you, you are evaluating them, and there's always this question till the end of the mind to say, are you right for me or am I right for you? And in fact, we have seen that almost 60% drop-offs happen till the evaluation piece. And even if they end up joining, there is this question for the first 90 days, did I make the right decision? So this is where the candidate experience is, right from the time you create the awareness and then the person joins and stays there for 90 days, is where till that time you have to keep understanding what's going on in the candidate's mind, and how as a recruiter are you going to kind of get to understand and provide for their unsaid needs. So you have to actually put yourself in their shoes before you can even attract the kind of talent that you want to attract to your this thing. Of course, we as a group have a lot of applications coming, but are those the people that we want to attract is always a question that our recruiters keep struggling on. So we said, okay, in this current market, we need to do a targeted and a focused communication. So to whom are we going to do the communication, and how are we going to do it, where, when, and all these things were kind of written in this new context. What is relevant, what needs to be sent out as such. And so there are communications which are pretty much targeted. It's not that one communication meets everybody's requirement. And we need to build the employer brand across the whole community. So it's the customer experience, the employee experience. It's not just one person's responsibility. It is actually involves the entire organization to work together on this. So what is it that we want each person to say, and what are the messages? That is something which we were actually sitting and curating out here and moving on. So now I would want to say, so this was basically the framework of what and how we went about this whole exercise, which I wanted to briefly take you through. Now I'll kind of take up one case study, which is our onboarding, and which was the most immediate need for us at that point of time when the lockdown happened. And as Rachel mentioned, it is balancing personalization, warmth. So it's not about just going digital from you're doing it, you're getting the form signed, now you get into the digital forms. Of course, that's something which we had done a couple of years back. So our systems were ready to take digital onboarding. But it is how do you kind of balance the personalization and warmth in times of social distancing? When you are unable to kind of meet the person, greet the person, you don't have that full infrastructure like I was talking about. How do you ensure that you have a successful virtual orientation once the person is about to join your organization? So we from my team, we actually put together a quick 10 10 pages. So as I said, experience is something which we are asking about, being proactively talking about the unmet needs to be done, but it also has to be consistent for the person who receives it. So it shouldn't be that one part of the office is doing something else and the other part of the office is doing something else. So what are the basic hygiene? For example, when you go for what we call about also experience in one of the case studies is a Starbucks coffee. So when you go out there and you get the same coffee every time, so there is a process to it, there is a basic hygiene made to it. So it does not vary whether you walk into a Starbucks store at Mumbai or you walk into a Starbucks store at New York. So what are those basics that we want to do so that the experience is consistent across all our offices, businesses, is what we were actually thinking about. So while technology is already there, it can only help. But we are talking about the in times of social distancing, how do you retain that personal warmth where you're not even meeting the person? And what is it that you need to do? And especially when a new joinee kind of joins, it is quite confusing. You are joining a new company in this time, and you don't know. There are a lot of things which Rachel mentioned, so I'm not going to repeat as such to say what a new person should be looking for, or what is it that we need to do. Maybe yes, the periodic table is something which we do, but for us it was how do you prepare the person to join the organization virtually. In India, laptops were not being, you couldn't actually physically get a asset delivered at that time in the initial 1 month. So how do you go about it? What are the resources that we can kind of use as such? Now, of course, these people are also very brave. Making a change at this time was not so easy for them. So we actually said, okay, we have to treat them as with extra special care as to when they're joining, they have a lot of questions in their mind. They don't understand the organization dynamics. How do we go about it? So one is to acclimatize them quickly. We have to mirror the human touch in every simple kind of interaction that we do. How can we do it? Look out for the changes, take feedback in every interaction that we kind of do with them. So it's basically we want to kind of make them successful at the earliest while having all these challenges that we have out here. So we went on to a calendar kind, not a periodic table, as to 7 days of joining. At the day of joining, what do you do? In the first 7 days, what are you kind of doing? The main thing is, of course, sitting on the screen, isolation, managing isolation out there, because you've joined a new organization, you don't know, you don't have colleagues. So how do you kind of make the person welcome into this? There's a lot of emotional stress people are going through, and of course there's family pressures and work from home for people who are not used to remote working. With for people who are used to remote working, they have a certain pattern as such. But we are actually talking because a large part of ABG is into manufacturing, and a lot of people were actually joining manufacturing as such. And especially when we are not a remote working too much. Of course, we had our policies, but that is work from home policies. But how do we enable it without the office infrastructure and support was the main thing. So what is it that the new joinee wants to know? So that yes, the periodic table definitely will help out here as to what is it, and that's what we try to put ourselves in their shoes for them to understand as such as their needs as such. What are their unmet needs? What is it that they are not saying? We were really cautious about managers connecting, and as I said, it's not just the manager connecting, it's actually the entire team has to connect with the person as such. And as I said, not just the recruiter, you have to engage the entire organization or the stakeholders that are going to interact to have a communication with the new joinee in the first 7 days, and then set a rhythm for the next 30 days. It will just take half an hour of each person's, but it will deliver a wow experience for the new joinee at that point. So the first 7 days was there. Unlike our normal method of saying, okay, day one you fill up the forms and then you kind of go through presentations, it was more about saying, can we break the day into some presentations and some interactions with our managers and the teammates and of course the buddies and all those things. So yes, it was more about that piece of it, and we have broken the whole journey across 3 months. It's not that you get inducted in the first 7 days, okay, now you go and start working. It was people were saying, okay, 3-4 days every day you kind of spend on this. So there's a custom personalized plan created for each new joinee where you kind of enlist support from their manager, their teams, and the other HR people in the organization, of course the buddy, and there are systematic check-ins planned for the new joinees so that they don't feel left out. The good part with ABG is we had a lot of systems which are already digitized. We have so we had our pre-orientation, a gamifications, onboarding gamification platform, which if a new joinee has not done, we actually ask them to kind of go onto the ABG onboarding app, complete the journey, for them to learn about the organization, all aspects of the Birla group. We have our virtual campus in terms of learning. So there were new courses that were kind of assigned to them. Of course, they were made part of all the WhatsApp groups that were relevant for them in terms of the teams that they were joining. They were given access to our Purnata portal, which is our HRMS, and of course, surveys and journeys were sent. So it is basically leveraging the existing infrastructure, the virtual infrastructure, and pulling it all together to kind of create an ongoing engagement. So the recruiter would plan out, okay, these are the courses which for your role are the most relevant, and you can kind of take them forward. So at least 4 or 5 such courses were given, and then the person, new joinee, would get an experience of the virtual Gyanodaya right from the day one. So yes, in the remote working, not everybody was too busy, the new joinees, but how do we kind of assimilate them for is required? So we took them, gave them access to our various. One of the important thing is, while laptops were a challenge for us, we were able to give them access onto our web Outlook, and they were being made part of all the groups for them to kind of start communicating on the Aditya Birla group email IDs and all. But one of the most important thing is put yourselves in their shoes, calm their apprehensions up front. So don't let them leave them out, kind of fending for themselves. This was the main thing, and that's why we call them superheroes, because I know they've taken a lot of courage to join a new company in this scenario. And as moving forward, one of the fallout of this virtual process would be, because if we don't develop the trust with each other, higher rate of drop off will happen. Because while yes, when the lockdown started, we never thought we would kind of end up hiring CXO people with this process, but definitely in the last 2 3 months we have ended up hiring CXO level people. But the thing is, since we don't have that connect that is kind of developing between the organizations, they're not understanding that our larger organization, they only meeting 2 or 3 people. How do we kind of ensure that the personal connect is very important? So this will actually lead to, if we continue this virtual and there's no personal connect, there could be a lot of drop-offs, is something which we have to be prepared for. So how do you assure the person at each and every stage is really important. You have to put yourself in their shoes, understand what their needs are, what is it that they are looking out for, and can we provide all of them proactively, is where we would say. So there are the 4 E's, which is basically engage, educate, encourage, and empower. How do you ensure they get to delivering what is required to deliver very big right in the beginning? As such, how do you empower them? How do you encourage the check-ins and everything? And of course, education of all the acronyms, organization, being part of the groups in the conversation right from day one. How do you immerse and assimilate is basically what is what we are talking about. To keep these 4 things in your mind as you keep going and assimilating a new joining. It is a difficult period because you haven't met the new joinee. He hasn't met you. So it will take a bit of a time, but always think of these things. How do you ensure the person is supported in all angles? So yes, this is a checklist we kind of put together for people to follow. As such, what to do, when the survey should go, and from the bosses, what should the bosses be doing about it? What should be, how can they help in the whole process? So we had kind of set up these guidelines to ensure a consistent experience for the new joinees. As I said, all our digital tools have kind of come into for our help out here. So we were lucky enough to kind of have all these infrastructures ready for us. It was just a way for us to weave it into our process and take it forward from there. So we actually set just the basic guidelines for everybody. These were some games to keep them engaged in the first this thing, especially for when you kind of do volume onboarding. How do you keep them engaged? Of course, one-on-one, there were a few games, but this was basically how do you keep the engagement going up? Because I know in the event piece of it, you are able. Esther, you want to speak?
I was just wondering whether when you want me to start taking questions from the audience, give me a cue.
Sure, I'll do that. So I guess since we're running out of time, so I wouldn't spend too much time out here. The last is, of course, how do we ensure that these people are able to tell their stories? Because if these people tell their stories onto the social media, we would kind of, people will get more and more uh, attracted to it, and it will become believable, and they will also feel special. So so these there were instructions kind of given to the new joiners on this. Getting on to our next initiative, now this is still underway. We are creating is basically again onto that thing of how can candidates' needs be met, and this is something which we are saying. What is the way in which we can kind of connect and proactively supply them for the information that they have to search for, and keep them engaged in during the hiring process. So the candidate engagement through digital means when you are unable to meet. So this is still under development. We have to kind of do, but I thought I'll share the broad concept for you. The whole idea is why we want to do it. We want our candidates to kind of talk about. So we are sensing the disruption out here. The new normal is basically you have to stay in their mind if you want to kind of attract them. And how do you get it? So what is the medium that they're looking at? Is it the WhatsApp? Is it the Facebook? It's the LinkedIn? What is the virtual medium we are kind of looking at? So uh, so what is it that we want to kind of putting ourselves into their shoes, understand the technology that we want to reach out. Of course, there is personalization in our communication that we need to do. So proactively share the curated organizational content, which is basically if we know a candidate is going for an interview, can we kind of share the interview tips? If a person is taking a virtual interview, what are the interview tips for the person to do? What should the hiring manager be doing? So these are tips on WhatsApp that we are kind of creating to improve the process as such, and kind of make the virtual hiring even more successful. Because right now the adoption has happened, but how do we sustain it going forward? Because that is going to be the new normal. Digital is the shortest distance now between the candidate and the recruiter. And with this whole pandemic, this has kind of become the only way possible also moving forward. Now candidates will kind of ask, why do you want me to come and meet you for in-person meetings when we can do it digitally? They will not be too comfortable traveling also going forward because of the social distancing. So how do you kind of ensure that they are able to connect? Yes, there is a lot of learning for us. We have to educate our hiring managers. We need to educate even our candidates and the recruiters as to what is it that you should anticipate for, and how can you kind of solve for these problems. So increase the offer acceptance rate, build on the candidate advocacy is basically our final this thing. The candidates have to start talking of the experience, because we are taking the feedback. I saw a lot of questions coming as to how do you take. We have a hashtag candid as a survey that kind of goes out after every interview, and not everybody responds to it, but at least 5 to 10% people who respond, we kind of take cognizance of that feedback, and we try to improve the processes at our end. But NPS is something which is here to stay, and it's gonna kind of being used in recruitment, and that's what we are doing. Akansha, next slide. So this is just to give you a glimpse as to what it is looking like. It's a sneak peek out there as to how we are going to interact and engage with our candidates from the ABG Careers handle on WhatsApp, because that's where our candidates are most comfortable, rather than bringing them onto the online piece of it. During the candidate journey, this virtual candidate center is basically for them to ask anything that they want to ask, and uh, it will be kind of supported by a bot, and that's the technology behind it, but will kind of be answered by the recruiter also. The numbers will be there, because that's where what is candidate seeking is basically an answer, and these questions can come at the middle of the night as well. What are the tips is basically it's about creating an experience and not a process. So I'm not saying this is a process as such. It's an experience, and what you define as an experience for your candidate is something you need to understand what the candidates that you are interacting with really want and proactively provide for it. Now, have a simple vision of what you want to achieve. For us, we are gunning for candidate advocacy, and that is where a lot of this thing is going to help us. That is our main objective. How do we increase our candidate advocacy? We have mapped the candidate journey, we understand their mindset, but for that the best thing is for you to walk in their shoes, understand the pros and cons of your process, listen carefully to the feedback they are saying, and improve your each step. Now if you are asking, it's not about just a survey being filled up. If you're asking for feedback, please act on it, and that's how you're going to improve your processes. It's a long continuum, so it's not about just a step, you do it one time and it happens. It's an ongoing loop. Just wanted to share with you something which is also helps on to our employer brand, which I studied. So we already have a social referral called T Connect, and the social loop, which is basically about the content. It's your candidate talks about you, your brand, your employees talk about your brand, and it all kind of comes together. So it's basically your candidate experience, your employee experience, which kind of bring your employer brand together, and it is experience at each stage. So if you have to infuse it with insights, the content that reflects your brand is basically not what you push out from your handle, but what these people are talking about, whether it be employee advocacy or whether it be candidate advocacy. And while these are tools that we are talking about, the T Connect and the Social Loop, which are internal tools for employee advocacy, we are actually building more towards the candidate advocacy, which is going to be our driver for our employer branding. So this is basically the new normal in terms of our employer branding, which is distant. We are distant but social. We need to read the stories. Is basically not what we are saying about it. It's actually what our candidates are talking about and what our employees are talking about. Yes, our leaders are there to kind of help candidates understand what is the culture, what are the values, so how do we bring out those stories. We do kind of keep pushing it out for our candidate experience so that people can know what working in Aditya Birla Group is, what is it that you can look forward to. So those are the kind of stories which we will be kind of taking it ahead as the content for candidate experience, the community focus, the organizational pulse, what's happening inside. And finally, ask our employers to be our ambassadors, because it's their word candidates will trust, because if they know anybody, they can connect to anybody. It's actually our employee who are going to advocate for us and not us as HR professionals. If people will always take whatever we say with a pinch of salt, but if our employees are talking about it, our candidates are talking about it, that's where is what's going to build for a great employer brand. So that's all from my side. Esther, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Poonam. I am just starting a small little poll on the site whether everyone is okay extending for another 10 to 15 minutes, because I want to make sure we have at least one question for you, Poonam, and there are a lot of them and a lot of comments that have come. And I want to just ask the audience whether they're comfortable doing the second breakout. So the second breakout was about one digital tool that you're using that it's really helping you. And I can see that 66% are saying, yes, let's extend for 10, 15 minutes. So that's great. So Poonam, one question that was there on the both questions was related to the the people managers, the managers who are part of the very critical part of the hiring process. Yeah. So any insights or any reflections about how do we enable and how do we train our hiring managers to adapt to this new context? Because it's not just the recruiter community that needs to transform, but it's also that hiring managers. What has changed for a hiring manager and how do we enable them?
So I would kind of give a twist to it. For us, we had specifically at Aditya Birla Group, since we are a traditional manufacturing organization, a lot of our hiring manager, until we don't have the printed resumes, until we don't have the feedback forms put in front of them, would not kind of do the interview. Now, the best part is with this lockdown, all of them have to fend for themselves. They have to find out how do you kind of If they have a printer at home, good, they can print it. But yes, I've had various conversations with senior stakeholders as to, can we postpone this till we open up? I said, no, we are unable to postpone it. We need to close it. We need to move ahead. So even those senior people who have like 30, 40 years in manufacturing, who have been resisting this change of digital adoption, are now working without secretaries and without printouts.
Yeah.
Yes, we want to enable them. As to our new ATS actually helps. We have kind of gone onto People Strong. It helps hiring manager to fill up the interview assessment with just a link provided onto the mobile. Once
Yeah.
they fill it up, it kind of goes and sits into the ATS. And the best part is the system also offers that they speak and that the script gets converted into a written assessment and goes. So how can we enable them with technology to make their lives also easier is basically we as recruiters have to talk about it. Technology is there. How do you leverage the right technology like Rachel was talking about and enable the hiring manager? How do you keep them updated? Hiring managers are walking from one meeting to another meeting. Do you even tell them what are the kind of questions they need to ask? What is it that they need to do? Can you kind of, it's not just about handing over a resume and an assessment. Can we
Yeah.
just make a brief note or a cover note? This is what we would want you to assess for, and this is what are this observations are on this candidate. This is something which we would want you to assess and validate for us. So
Yeah.
how can we make their lives easier is also onto us as recruiters to do it.
Absolutely, absolutely, Poonam, and I think that's such a simple way and yet so powerful for you to really become a partner for that hiring manager to enable him or her to be able to leverage that opportunity. Great. So what we're gonna do, Poonam, also gonna invite you to join the chat. There are a lot of questions for you and a lot of appreciation for the work that you are leading at Aditya Birla, and everyone is really, really commending the great work that you have done. And I'm very complimenting, I think Rachel took us through some of the principles and you took us through actual, real practices that you've implemented. And I think that's been the value for everyone in this masterclass. Great. So thank you so much and welcome back. We are actually 11 minutes behind schedule, but I requested for your permission to go beyond, and all of you agreed. So I think it was useful, very, very useful. Please keep sharing the new tools that you're using because we will compile them all and share them with all of you. I want to take this opportunity to thank again Rachel. Thank you so much for in such a short notice putting this beautiful presentation for us. It was very, very meaningful. So thank you, Rachel, for being with us this morning.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure.
And thank you, Poonam, for sharing the case study of Aditya Birla and how are you navigating and creating a silver lining for your organization. It was a very, very meaningful presentation. So thank you once again, Poonam.
Thanks, Esther. Thanks for this opportunity. It was lovely interacting with you and the participants. I guess the time was too short. You weren't able to switch tables as such. So yes, thank you for this.
I know, I agree with you, Poonam. So that's the feeling when we get leaders like yourselves, all of you together, time is always too short. But I think it's in the power of keeping it curated and keep it short that hopefully you will be looking for more. And I think this is a community and everyone is available to interact with each other. The next step for all of you will be to go to the People Matters platform and go to now the application. What did you learn from this session? What was the aha moment for you? What are you going to do with it? How are you going to apply it to your organization? So I'm inviting you all to take maybe this 10-15 minutes this afternoon to just go back to the platform and go to the project assignment, inviting you. There are two questions we've curated for you. One is, what are the new perspectives that you build from Rachel and Poonam's session today, and you want to take with you and apply in your organization? That's the first question. The second question is, how are you going to create that memorable and distinct candidate experience for your organization? What are the things that you learned from Rachel and Poonam, but what are the things that you also learned from your colleagues on the tables? And that gives you an opportunity to reimagine that distinct candidate experience that you want to build for your organization. So these are the two questions we're inviting you to work on. And after that, tomorrow you'll get a chance to give feed forward to each other as well. And that's also important in the process of learning from candidate experience. Now, next week, we're going to focus, actually later this week, Kansha, if you can show the slide on what are the upcoming programs. The learning experience journey is our next program, and it's very, very intensive program that all of you are going through. We have the opportunity to have Ben, Christopher, Kavita, and Todd, who are going to be with us. And this is which day, Akansha?
This is on Friday, Esther.
This is on Friday. So I will see you all on Friday as we get embarked in the learning experience journey. All right. So have a wonderful day, everyone. And I look forward to seeing you very, very soon.